It is 6:03. I call the meeting of the Bias and Hate Incident Reporting Work Group to order. Start by calling the roll. Go around the room, state your name, whether you're present or absent.
Agnes present.
Debbie present.
Cindy physically present.
Just meant to say Dan Hart present.
And Paul Bowman present, so we're all here. Let me start out with any public comments. I think during the meeting, there'll be opportunities for public comments and as part of the discussion, so just be aware this isn't the last opportunity, but any public comments, anybody online? Nobody online? Okay. Good. Well, thank you all here. I think this is going to be an interesting meeting as it evolves. First thing I want to do is look at the January 6th minutes. Another magnum opus by Magnolia. Any comments on the minutes? If you've had a chance to look at them.
No comment.
Do we have a motion to?
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, great. Good job. Thank you. Since we have a little time before, so remember these meetings before are part of our, I'll call it research and briefings. You know, it's the input of information. I think starting February, we'll start to digest all the information, but I just want to open up for any initial reaction. We haven't had time to kind of debrief on any of the discussion. Remember, we've had police department come in, we've had town council, we have Carlos Hoyt. We had a focus group, which it's on the agenda to talk about later, but just any thoughts from any of the briefings? Are they worthwhile? Are they helpful? Dan.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think they're worthwhile, very helpful to get multiple perspectives and expertise. I mean, at least only speaking for myself, of course, it's very helpful to be able to take all of that into account. I was actually interested to hear the group's feedback on Carlos Hoyt, some of what he recommended, and in particular, because I think we spoke quite a bit about some of his recommendations for our consideration, and one of them was to actually rename, not call it sort of incident reporting and to sort of think of it somewhat differently. And I was just curious to know what other people's reactions were.
Well, I'll just note that I know we're going to talk about the focus groups later, but that was actually that same comment was echoed by some folks in the focus group the other day.
It's a practical, no objection, it makes a lot of sense, whatever that name is. I'm just wondering what the practical implications are. We can't change it on the website without the select board renaming it. We can't change our charge. Yeah, we could call it anything, but what would you be your suggestion?
I wasn't suggesting it. Actually. I was more curious just to hear the group's feedback. I agreed with some of what he said and not all of it. I've certainly seen incident used in other organizations effectively, but at the same time, he brings another perspective and raised questions that I hadn't thought about. So I was just curious. I'm digesting it.
Yeah, I like the name change you proposed, right? I think you had the work was called. But to Paul's point, I think this is bias and hate incident reporting working group. I think if we change on the fly, folks who are tracking one may not know that this is a working group, or I don't know, I'm not a marketing or a branding person, but I think given that this is the name of the working group, I think at least through submit the report, that's.
No, I think it may more affect how we think about what we're doing than actually the name. I think Carlos was really strong about calling everything we're doing social bias. And that, the hate part of it, and understanding when you talk with district attorney about that, we really, a lot of what we're talking about is social bias, and that's what we want to capture. So, I mean, I think Carlos's comment on the name got me thinking about, so the focus, we're really probably largely focusing on everything before we get to the hate part. It's just sort of a vestige of when we put it together.
But it wasn't just the naming of this group or even what we're calling it. He was actually questioning, I think, unless I have this wrong, he was questioning whether we should be focusing our efforts on this entire reporting system as our, he thought that we should be putting resources into other things. Remember? That's,
No,
I should have been more specific. That's kind of what I'm
and
interested in.
no, that I think we should be. I don't think this is the be all end all, right?
Yeah.
But I still think this is worth doing and seeing it through. And Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, because we're doing this, it doesn't mean we're not doing anything else, right?
Well, we have to talk about what else we're doing, what else is, charge. I'm mindful.
No, not our church,
Yeah, come on.
the town,
Oh, no, when you say we,
yeah, no.
Oh,
We the town, because.
okay, well,
What he pointed out was,
okay,
the
well, that's a whole
recommendation,
other
1,
thing.
2, 3,
Right,
and
right.
you guys pay.
We,
Some of that's out of the bailiwick of this group.
okay, because we, this working group, and then we, the town.
Right.
We, the town, certainly have a lot to do. And we, this working group, are creating a tool to be used in larger we. I think so the DI Commission and Human Rights Council, we'll talk with them, there are other groups in town that need to figure out how to capture the larger issue and with the schools, but it's a big job. And I think what we've been thinking about is, and what we really need to talk about is the need and the value for people reporting, and the need and the value for the community to get the information. So the need of the value so the input and the output is where, that's sort of our boundary. So I think beyond the system, whatever that is, we need to understand how it's going to be used, who might use it, and in the front end, why people would find value and not find value reporting. So I see the remit of this group expanding beyond a system, but our system is larger than a form. Our system is larger than the data themselves. So in that sense, there is I think what we've heard, and I think what we're thinking is it's a larger implication of both ends, the input and the output for what we're doing.
Wasn't the other issue, I wasn't present, so I just picked up bits of it from a recording that Joe sent me. Wasn't the other issue about how we're going to use the information that is collected from the incident report? How were we going to provide referrals, or how are we going to use that information once it's in the hands of the town?
Exactly. I mean, well, so that's the output, that's the value and the needs of the information, and who takes that information. And because I think we want to design something that's useful for not just for the town manager, but for the DI Commission, Human Rights Council, and others, and the schools, the larger issue. So yeah, so I think what we have to do is be very mindful of how the information is going to be used. I mean, I've done a lot of work in my professional career about databases and data management, and you really have to ask the users what they want and what they need before you design a system. So we're kind of getting that kind of input to it. That's the users should drive the system, not the engineers.
Right.
Not that any of us are engineers. Any engineers? Yes, okay, a couple of engineers.
We certainly did get input at the focus group. I mean, it is the case that unfortunately only 3 people more had been signed up. And only 3 people could show up, but that's all right. We're having another one. So, but we did ask that question very specifically to get, because that's a key question. And we got quite a bit of feedback in the discussion, which I'll share, but I think that's important. I think one thing that I've been thinking about around this sort of like, well, what gets reported here? I think that there's a couple of considerations. One is obviously we aren't the district attorney's office, so we're not law enforcement. So we're not going to be prosecuting anything. We're like getting information, but there well may be, just by virtue of setting it up, some people who come to us and report things that are actually crimes. And there's legal definitions for all of these things. And so in those cases, we should be able to, in my opinion, be able to refer people to law enforcement to make the reports so that process can happen. And then there's gonna be probably quite a bit of stuff that falls in the other zone. I think you were calling it sort of 1 through 8 the other day or whatever, like whatever the category is. And so I think we should be available to provide referrals, like in case somebody does come to us with a crime or an alleged crime, but then referring them.
So
Right.
clarification on that, you think we would just refer the folks to go do it, or would it become a responsibility now that we know of a crime that we also have to report it?
Well, I think it kind of depends on like, there's mandated reporter
Right.
laws, so that, I mean, there's all sorts of things that, I think we'll have to, again, because I'm not able to.
Right now, we're just gathering information.
Right, but I mean, that's where I think that the town consults with their council to figure out, to what extent. Like if somebody's coming, for example, to talk about a crime that happened for, let's say, for a child or a vulnerable adult, then there's some reporting requirements that that certain people have, depending on who they are. So we have to kind of figure that out. Do we have to call DCF? Do we have to call, the sort of adult protective services or whatever it's called in the state? But those kinds of questions, and we have to figure that.
Yeah, I'm very mindful of the scope of work we're doing. What you're saying is absolutely true. But I think we have to set up something where, so the information is going to be reviewed. So we've designed the greatest system, right? Which has value on both ends of it. The information comes in and some of it needs to go elsewhere, but that's not, we have to make sure that we develop something that enables the reviewer of the information, whoever that is, or maybe to flag a particular type of incident immediately, a 911. So I think we have to figure out our role in optimizing that flow. Does that make sense? Because our job, at least as far as I know, is going to be completed, and we recommend to the select board what we should do. And then there's an implementation phase, and maybe we've been involved in it, maybe we won't. But then there's an actual use. And if it's a town system, there's going to be somebody in town to screen all of this. And, it's very idealistic. We haven't figured that out yet, but.
Right.
So I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying it's very important,
Yeah.
but,
And it can be built, I think, within the system. For example, when you call the hospital, they'll say, oh, your doctor's appointment, they'll say, if this is an emergency, call 911. So you can envision that if it is a criminal act, for example, you might call the police or whatever, that this is not a place for you to report that someone has been shot, right? I'm being,
No.
of course, but at least you have parameters within the system where you're saying certain categories can immediately, you need to call this number, the police and all of that.
this sounds like a perfect segue to inviting the district attorney to the table. So we'll have more discussion of this. But I do want to thank you, District Attorney Ryan, for coming here. I think our small group has sort of a big charge in terms of what we need to do. But you probably, I don't know if you were here earlier, we sort of we need to figure out not just what the data collection system is, but on both ends of this, people reporting, the safety of people reporting. We've talked to outside counsel about confidentiality and public records issue. And then on the far end, how the information is used by whom. So some of that might be used by your office. Would you like to come to the table here? Yeah. And
I've been thinking as I listen to these questions, so for people who don't know, when we created our anti-hate, anti-bias task force about 5 years ago now, one of the things we did was create an online form for people to report things that either where they were victimized or where they witnessed something. So we get those, I would say on average, we get about 3 or 4 a month. And it's not really 3 or 4 a month. What tends to happen is something happens in the country or something happens here, we get a whole bunch. And then we might go a few months without seeing any of them. People can report anonymously. So to the extent they're reported we follow up on everyone. If they're reported anonymously, we go to the police, obviously, and try to see if they can reconstruct whatever it is. Did they hear anything about something that happened on Main Street, and try to piece that together? I would say a good number of people provide their information. So we reach out to them, we have initial conversations. If it looks like that's a crime, we're gonna have the police come and interview them. We're gonna start that process. A lot of people want to know, what's it gonna look like if I go to the police? What does that mean? If I talk to the police, does that mean I have to go to trial someday? So we talked through all of that. The value for us has probably been threefold, one of which, there are a lot of people, for whatever reason, that are not walking into the police station. They're not going there no matter what's happening. So this is a way for them to put out the information, and then we can make that contact. The second is, and I think in many ways, when we started this became probably the most important. There are a lot of things that happen, very disturbing things, that I think people may know, well, that's not a crime, so I'm not gonna go to the police station. But it's not right what I saw, or it's not right what happened to me. And they didn't have any place to go with that. So this gives them a place to be able to talk about what happened to them. And then we do talk to them, and we try to piece through what might be helpful to them. And the third for us, and this was really important to me, is when we would go out to investigate an incident that had risen to law enforcement attentions, for instance, what most of the time we would hear is, this has been going on forever. This is, the fifth in a series of things that happen, and we don't know anything about 1 through 4. And so doing this, even though a lot of what comes in, because we're also obviously getting all the reports from the police department, a lot of what comes in these forms is not a crime. It helps us to focus our resources and to think about, I have 54 cities and towns. If I'm getting a lot of reports from this town about this, well, we need to get some training going out there. I need to talk to the chief. We need to be thinking about what to do. My goal is to make everybody not just be safe, but feel safe. So we want to be addressing these problems. The first time you're in a community and something happens to you, we want to know about that so we can start thinking about it, not the sad piece, which is, I've been living here for 8 years and this has been happening to me every 2 weeks. And, I just think of how isolating that is. And you didn't really have the place to go with it. And it's somebody driving by calling you a name or something. It's not a crime. So what do you do with that? I brought, and I would have brought more, I apologize for that, but I brought a form. You can see our form. That's available online. Some of the things we learned were just how important it was to have it be phone accessible, because most people are not going home to do it, especially if they witness something outside. Two of the interesting things we have seen from this, we really track where things are happening, not just cities and towns, but in what circumstance. And an inordinate number of very hateful incidents happen at places involving food. Whether it's the grocery store or a restaurant, for some reason, there's a lot of really awful, hateful things that happen in those circumstances, and in banks. Typically the ATMs, for instance, 1 year, every single incident we had in Cambridge happened at a bank vestibule. And I don't know whether it's people encounter other people there that maybe they wouldn't see somewhere else. Because we have a large unhoused population there. I don't know whether, for instance, at the grocery store, as people are stressed. I now realize that this costs $6 to buy this and they're stressed about it. And then the wrong thing happens and they just feel free to say whatever they're saying. But we've been able to tease out those really interesting pieces of what's there. I think you'll see from that form, we capture a lot of demographic information, but we really give people that opportunity to just talk about what it is that happened to them in their own words, not trying to fit it into what's the definition of a crime or whatever. That's our job. You just tell us what happened, and then we'll come back to you, ask you questions and make an assessment. You know, I was thinking as I was sitting here, whether there's a way, instead of reinventing the wheel, we could just share that information. Because there is, you know, we would skim off from there the things that are actually crimes. To the extent that there's other issues that are there, we could certainly figure out a way to anonymize that information enough to share. I will say, I think that's one of the real issues people have. Especially in smaller towns, they do not, everybody knows everybody. So as soon as they start saying, you know, my kid is on the football team or something, well, now we're down to 20 kids. So I think that's, if you want to get good information, you want to give people space, and then they obviously don't want it talked about by people they know. So I would say that probably argues in favor of being able to share that, and we're happy to try to figure out a way to do that.
Thanks. I want the, there's probably a lot of questions for everybody. I'd like the working group to have the first set of questions, and I'll start the first one. So when we started this effort, the first reaction of everybody is, don't reinvent the wheel.
Right.
And so we said, no, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We're going to look to see what's out there with your office and other offices. But we felt that there's not a lot of reporting in Concord. There's not a lot of data, and we really don't know what's going on. So how do we improve the system where people would feel value of reporting? And even if it is the same form, there's, like, as I mentioned before, there's the front end. How do we capture the information? I use the range of incidents from 1 to 8, however you. But I'm curious what your system. It's not all crimes.
No,
Name quote. What the types of incidents are reported?
the name calling.
So somebody will.
Somebody will say, you know, my neighbor feels free every time I'm out in the backyard to yell some slur over at me.
Okay, so that comes
And
into you,
then, you know, obviously that's not a crime,
right?
but we're gonna be talking about, for instance, whether there'd ever be grounds for a harassment prevention order. We're certainly gonna be focused on what do we need to do. I will say, interestingly, and I applaud the effort of looking at this, so I'm saying this in terms of thinking about what the scope of the problem is. Every report we have received for the last 6 months has been from Concord.
Really?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. A lot of them from the schools. Involving not from the schools, but school incidents.
So what the other question I have, then in your mind, what is the value of towns developing a system, including forms and reporting, versus your form? Because there are other towns that have developed their system.
Yeah, I live in Belmont.
Is the value to you in your office and having the towns develop their own information?
I don't know what the value of that is, because to the extent there are crimes, we already have that from the police department. Our form gets used a fair amount, so a lot is coming. I don't think we, you know, it might give you some incident that you get reported that we didn't, maybe. But I don't think that's a big volume of it. I do think what it speaks to is people. I guess what I would say is, I think what is most important is that people see what the response is to a fight. And that is more important than anything else. I would say the communities where they have developed a good system of the information they get about a complaint has really not only increased reporting, but I think built the trust in the community. I think we have some communities where there's a lot of thought and concern about what data is out there, but we aren't actually thinking about addressing the underlying problem.
Yeah, that's important.
I spend a lot of time in our communities. We go a lot, obviously, when there's been an incident. A lot of our incidents in every community involve the schools. As I said, the most successful communities are when there's actual follow through. The meeting about let's figure out what the information is, has to precede, we actually did something. And that is when I think you probably won't have people then reporting to us, they will be talking to the school, they'll be talking to people in town. Right, ideally, we would hope that if you live in a community and something hateful has happened to you, you should have a level of trust that there's somebody, a select person, a superintendent, somebody that you could go and, really reporting on a piece of paper is not ideal.
Yeah.
And this, I see this really as a way of building those bridges and establishing trust. Some communities have been very successful at that, others not as much.
Do you have other means of reporting other than the forms? Do people call up your
People-
office?
We obviously get them from the police.
Yeah,
We get them from the schools in some communities. People call us all the time.
Yeah.
They stop me at events and report things. So we get, and I think really that proves the point. I spend a lot of my time out talking to people about these things. It's like anything. If I'm willing to be open and talk about something, you're gonna come up and tell me something. So people tell me, and many more than the complaints I get, because I'm physically there and they can talk to me. I think some of these are very minor, but a lot of these are really disturbing incidents. I'm not sure as a society, having somebody sit and look at their phone to report that is the best system. It is where we are right now because in many places the trust doesn't exist. But I don't think that should be our goal for the future. I'd like to get to a place where, and we have in some communities, where there's enough conversation that we know everything and it's not coming on the form. But it's a hard work, it's a work in progress.
What do you do with the information that is told to you? For example, if you are at a game or something that is outside of the form.
So then I go back, our office is divided regionally by communities. So for instance, if I was at something and somebody said something, the first thing I would do, and I say this all the time, we could not do the work we do in this county without our partnerships with the police department. Probably on my way home, I'd be calling the chief to say, hey, I was just at this thing, somebody told me this, do you know anything about that? And either yes or no, they do, or will you call the superintendent with me tomorrow? Can we call whoever, the library, wherever it's supposed to have happened? So I'm gonna start peeling back, trying to figure out what's there. And then obviously, if I've had the chance to talk to somebody, I ask them if they're willing to share their contact information with me, and then I can go back to them. Did you?
Yeah, the question about verification, but also it kind of goes to the anonymous part. When
Yeah.
it makes total sense that someone might feel comfortable reporting anonymously for all the reasons you said. I would imagine that makes it that much harder for you, because you can't really go back to ask follow-up questions since you don't know who the person is.
Pretty good at finding.
Okay. It's just my own night. Okay.
I get five.
Right, okay.
You know what, usually what happens when we start looking at it, especially in a smaller community, the chief will have heard of it, or somebody heard of it, or something, and we very much are a victim-centered office, so if somebody says to us, yeah, that happened to me, but my son or daughter doesn't want me to say anything about it, whatever, we're gonna abide by that, to the extent it doesn't present a danger for everybody else. I've had things happen in this community where somebody will say, something happened to my child's a senior, and they said, Mom, don't say anything about this. So we're gonna be I'm gonna be thinking about that information as we think about what can we do for a community, but we're not gonna force that family to come in and go forward.
Sorry, I didn't finish the question.
Oh, the verification part. Well, as you said, you're gonna take everything at 100% value to begin with, because someone is
Right.
taking the time to report, which is
Right.
what you want. And then what is the verification?
We don't find anything, sometimes, for instance, somebody says, I was in Harvard Square and I saw this. Well, we might never unravel that.
Right.
You know, it was I was walking into a restaurant and I heard somebody yelling some terrible slurs at people or something. And, you know, it seemed to escalate. Well, we might or might not ever find out who that is. Those are a very small number of things. The others tend to be things in a community where people are known, or they've been there for a long time and maybe they've often been victimized.
Thank you. Any questions?
Yeah, I'm interested, you mentioned earlier, like, some possibility of collaboration.
Yeah.
I'm very interested in that idea because, I could imagine there's probably a lot of room for collaboration, and, I mean, from my perspective, and I think, you know, it's a way to sort of expand the advocacy capacity that both
Yeah.
the DA's office and the town has around this. Have you, like, do you have like MOUs or other arrangements with others, cities, or towns, that you think would be a good model for us to consider, or that you're able to share?
I think that the places where we have been most successful, it has grown in terms of, first of all, they tend to be communities that have had some very bad experiences. We then have been in that community a lot. We've been doing trainings, we've been at the school, we've been working on things. We have built enough of a relationship and have started that process of building a relationship with the community, that information is starting to come organically. And, you know, my goal, while I want to know the information and, you know, it's important for us to think, is it, you know, people of this minority or that minority, or is it this, you know, is it a directed because of somebody's sexual orientation? We want to know that. My goal would really be to put me out of some of this business, because I think they should be solved at a local level. And our role is really to help start building that. There are communities where, frankly, I'm not sure that is gonna get built, and we are gonna have to continue to be in that mix, I think, for a long time. But I've seen really remarkable progress in places where there's been horrible things happen, and from that has come a lot of growth.
Couple of questions for you.
Yeah.
I think I'm piggybacking off of what Debbie said, and you also mentioned it, we don't want to leave them rules. So,
Right.
One of the things, at least in my mind, what we're looking for is to get a proper understanding of what's happening in our town, so.
I could tell you about that.
Right, so
Yeah.
is there a way for us to, like you said, in the last 6 months, all the reports have been covered,
Yeah,
for us to know what those are, so. Or is that?
yeah, I mean, the bulk of them have been school-related incidents. I could certainly anonymize those in a way without making them identifiable. But, you know, it seems to be that there's a lot of, and I'm just making this up, name calling or whatever that's happening. Or reporting of things and no response, those kinds of things. So I can certainly do that.
Will be very valuable.
Yeah.
Similarly, right, if we do end up, well, when we do end up, you know, having a system, I would hope that some of that information flows over to you and then vice versa.
Sure.
That's one.
Yeah,
You mentioned, you know, you hear about a lot of these verbally.
Mhm.
I have something to report, but that's later. But I think it's important for us to capture those also. Is that, you know, for example, you said you called the chief and you say there's so and so happening. Does that get documented and put back in the system?
well, it depends. If it's something that the police are gonna be investigating or whatever, they're gonna start generating reports or whatever. If it is just, hey, somebody told me that every time they drive by this place, somebody yells at them, or whatever, we just make the form ourselves, so we know that we had it, yeah. Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
Mhm.
You could say something about underreporting, your sense of when you say most of the incidents in Concord from the schools, I believe that. But the fact that the no incidents reported in the town,
In a town,
in our town or, well,
what did you do?
well, I'm just, I'd like your thoughts about underreporting and if that occurs and why that occurs. And part of my I'm sure there's a lot of reporting from our schools because of all the incidents, and they've had a system for a while, but I don't know of any reporting on the town level here, and part of what we're doing, and why we're doing it is because the schools have their system right now, it's working.
To
The
be
ta-
clear,
yeah.
it's not the school reporting to me. It is
Yeah.
people reporting things that happened at the school.
Yeah, the school.
Yeah.
So there's still incidents in school, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So those incidents could be reported, if they're not, they could report through the town or through the schools. I mean, as strange as that sounds, ultimately, we'd like to have one system, but I'd like your thoughts on, underreporting, whether you think that occurs and whether that could be improved or
Yeah.
decrease,
That's not.
and yeah,
I think,
decrease underreporting,
People-
increase reporting.
so if the question is, what do I think are the reasons people don't report?
Yeah,
I think probably the most benign reason is something happens and somebody thinks, well, I saw that. It's not a crime. I don't know what anybody's gonna do with that. And that, I think, is education. Letting people know that, yes, we aren't gonna go arrest somebody because they screamed a slur at somebody. But you deserve to live in a place where that doesn't happen. And so that's an education piece. I would say that's probably the primary reason, right? Why would I report that? Somebody just called me some name. Nobody's gonna do anything about that. I think some of it is not wanting to be exposed. I don't want people to know that I'm being treated that way. I'm embarrassed. Nobody wants to be perceived as weak. Nobody wants to be perceived as, so for instance, we have a lot of incidents that long time neighborhood things. It is always shocking to me. They've lived in the same street for 6 or 7 years and it's been going on. Nobody wants to be perceived as the person who's essentially being abused in their own home. So people are embarrassed. I mean, it's the same reason you don't report domestic violence. People are embarrassed. They don't want to report that. I think a big factor is what people have seen before. If they've seen maybe these things happen and other people have reported and nothing really happens, well, what's the point? I think that is an issue with some of the school things. Or I've seen other people go do it. Nothing changes. Why do I want to put myself out there to end up in the same place? I think we live in a very fraught time where everybody does not want to expose themselves. Many people do not want to expose themselves to any government agency or interference of that sort. So I think those are probably the 4 biggest reasons. that people
and
don't
then you think
report.
education is probably the solution to underreporting? I mean,
It's a
Yeah.
piece of it because when we go to a community and we talk about what you shouldn't tolerate, reports from that community go on.
But it sounds like trust building is
Yeah.
also a big part of it.
Yeah,
And
just
seeing
reporting
results.
to us. But also I think, in the communities where we've seen a lot of growth, it has been when people see, when I report that this happened, people took it seriously and something changed.
Can we follow up on your comment about you're getting a lot, the bulk coming from the school, but not the school reporting,
Right.
but
The school has never reported.
they've
an
never
incident.
reported. So I guess, that really concerns me a lot
Mhm,
because
concerns
schools
me.
have a reporting obligation now. And I mean, as you well know, and we are well aware that there is, this whole thing kicked off because of the ADL complaint and the complaint, the DOJ investigation, all of that stuff was here. And there's been a number of reported incidents that we've learned that way, but it's incredibly troubling to find that, or to hear that the school doesn't report. And I guess I feel like that needs to be resolved somehow. And so I don't know if you're able to share with us, if there are any efforts to address that, because the school is part of the town. And the town here is working on this reporting system, but it feels like it's this separate entity that is not interacting here. And I think in order to be able to address these issues, we need the school to be, and you're clearly a representative. Yes, you're here. And I appreciate that, and I'm glad, because then you can take that information back to your colleagues, but, and I don't mean any disrespect to you or anybody, but I'm just very worried about this, and I think we need to solve that problem in order to make this whole system work and to make the ultimate improvements that we're trying to have as a result of this. And so I don't know if there's any
I think-
thing that you could share with us that would, that.
So there's a lot, right? I'm not looking to run a school. And there are many things, and this has become more difficult in the time that I've been in this job. There are many things that are, you know, discipline school issues that should get resolved in school.
Mhm.
You know, I don't want people calling the police or the DA's office because a couple of 7-year-olds are in a tussle about whatever.
Yeah.
That's a school issue, in my view, and that's why we pay experts to be there to deal with that. There are things, whether or not you report something, I think depends on whether you are open to seeing it, whether you are actually looking at what it is. You know, we could all see or hear the same thing, and some would say, well, that's kids being kids. Some would say that's a very hateful thing. And if it's kids being kids, nobody's telling anybody about that. If it's a hate or bias incident, somebody should be talking about that. So I think that's an education piece, I think, in terms of, and that is a community, that's not my job, that's a community standard in terms of what you're willing to tolerate. You know, the 6 or 7-year-old who says some inappropriate word. That is a home issue, and that is something the school should be dealing with, because that child's getting that word someplace, and that's an issue for them to deal with. You know, 14-year-olds who are repeatedly using that language and calling each other those names, that's a hate incident, and people should be dealing with that differently. They look similar. In my view, they're not similar, but I think if you can see things in the way you want to see them.
I'm gonna open this up
Yeah.
in a second, just, I wanted to finish the working group.
One clarification, the reporting requirement for the schools is to the police department or to the DA's office?
It's actually, well, if it's a crime, it's obviously to the police department. If it is something they find abusive or neglectful to a child, it's to DCF, Department of Children and Families. We very much make ourselves available to schools to say, you know, we have a hotline, we have whatever, just call us. Like sometimes, you know what, so okay, you saw something, you don't know what to do. We have schools that call us all the time that say, this happened, like, it's not clear cut sometimes. Is this kids being kids, or should we be worried about this? You know, what should we be doing? And we're happy to have those conversations. These are hard questions. Or to say, you know, I'll go check with appeals for you. Maybe that does get to a crime level. Let's think that through.
And I guess following up on that, are there schools within, I guess you'll.
McCounty, yeah.
That do a good job of this, have you heard?
Yes. Yes,
I would welcome those names, so I can
sure.
pass on.
Yeah, and they are typically, again, as I said, they are typically schools that have had hard times. And they have very intentionally changed how they do
Try to
things.
improve. Try to improve coming out.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
So, yeah, it sounds like then that your office really provides a really good resource. for
we are a
schools.
great resource.
To
People,
help.
you pay for us.
Yeah.
People should use us, yeah.
Right, right,
Yeah.
it can really help school districts figure out and navigate what to do. I mean, ultimately they have to decide, but that's a really, sounds like you guys are a really excellent resource.
And these aren't easy. Like, I can understand a superintendent or a principal saying, I don't really know what to do here. And, you know, we live in a litigious world. So every parent has a lawyer and we're all running around and whatever. Sometimes you just need to take a breath and figure out what it is that's actually going on here.
Let me open it up to the public questions and comments. Craig?
I love this conversation. Because, I mean, this is an issue I brought to the attention of the school committee directly. That if the schools do not report, they're making a decision in a vacuum. That you, with law enforcement, you have information that they don't have. You have work group, you have task force, you have access to information, you're in touch with the FBI, et cetera, far beyond anything that any school administrator has any understanding. And to make that decision to report or not to report without the consultation of law enforcement on some, on an advisory, I think presents a serious, in these fraught times, public safety issue.
So if they do report to us, we have school resource officers, and then when they have an incident, a hate incident or bias incident in the school, they report it to the school resource officer. They're also dealing with it internally, because again, it doesn't rise for crime, right? They will deal with it internally with the student, with the parents, but they will report it to us. And then we'll end up reporting it to the DA's office and the ADL, and you know, if it rises to that.
So how is it that it didn't happen this last time? Or was it lost?
Okay, these are really good questions, and I want to. One of the conversations kind of help us. I mean, part of what I'm hearing here. I mean, if we develop a system which is different from the school incidents could be reported through this system as well, and there may be some reticence of reporting through the schools for various reasons. But there shouldn't be any reason for school incident not to appear in the town system, and then we could refer. So I think this may help the situation, whatever the barriers are for reporting. I'm not commenting on the barriers for the schools acting on reporting it. Michael.
Thank you very much. Really enlightening. One of the things that people want to see something happen, you touched on it numerous times there, Ryan. And that makes me think about what Carlos had said earlier. If we know that things are happening, we question about the reporting system, and more question about building the trust, what we need to build the trust in the community. And the community to see that, oh, I reported this and things are getting better, or I reported this and things are the same, so I'm not gonna bother reporting them. If they're getting better, you may get more reports, but the community feels like they see me and they've got my back. And I think I'm still stuck on the last meeting, and everything I'm hearing sort of brings get the numbers, get the understanding, but also act on something to get that second part where the community says, they saw me and they're looking out for me.
Well, to that point, you know, there are many people who come to us who say, this happened, I want somebody arrested, you know. For the most part, I think people, number one, and we train our people to not talk in the beginning, just let people tell you what it is. And people want to be heard. And then secondly, sometimes the answer is not what they might have hoped for. It's, you know, that was terrible that you were subjected to that name calling or whatever, but that is mean and hateful and all sorts of things, but it is not actually a crime. And, you know, most people can actually hear that once they've had an opportunity to unpack their whole version of what happened. And then to that, I was seeing, but then the question is, you know, and I'm gonna direct you to maybe this would be helpful. Or I'm gonna give the chief a call and maybe we together could do something. Because I think that's true. I think people want to feel like what happened to them, and these are all painful, comes to something.
I just had a real simple question.
Yeah.
Of the complaints that were school-based, would you give us a sense of how many of those incidents were reported to the school first, or did they come to you directly? And if they did so, would you direct them to go contact the school?
I would say, I will say in general. Usually when people come to us, it is because they have been dissatisfied. This is true across the board. They come to us because they've been dissatisfied with response or no response.
Good, thanks.
Interesting. Any other questions? I really appreciate your coming here. This is.
Of course, I mean, we're happy to help.
Yeah, and you know, whatever we develop, it's ultimately it's going to be in concert with what you're doing and what other entities in town are doing. We don't want to develop this in isolation. So this input is really important. And
The important piece is, obviously, you're all here and putting in the effort of that, and then maybe starting at the back end of what's really the goal here. I don't think it's really to know what's out there, it's to actually affect some change.
right, this is a vehicle, you know.
Yeah,
What you don't measure, you don't manage. It's the adage of, and so I think we need to know for a variety of reasons what's happening and over time, are there trends? And of course, we need to act on it. If we don't act on it, the system will die, as you said.
say, and maybe some of you were, I was on the Zoom a couple months ago with the school.
Yeah.
You know, it was very concerning to me that people said the same thing was happening when my child graduated in 1984. I mean, you know, that. See, here's a place to start, is, you know, I've been in this office a long time. I would say I see a lot of the same complaints coming from Concord that I saw 20 years ago. So I think that gives a sense of, you know, there needs to be something, not just grabbing it, is what are we actually doing about it? So
Sure.
we are happy to be helpful, and you have a great police department and a great chief, so, and we talk way too much, so.
And thank you for coming.
Here,
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
We really appreciate it.
We also have
Yes.
we also have an excellent human rights council. And if you guys want to sit over here, just. So. Guys, advice, you know what we're doing, and
So,
you're one of the
thanks for inviting us.
yeah.
I'm Fort Booth, and next to me is Rob Morrison. Rob and I have been on the Concord Carlisle Human Rights Council for some time. To echo what the DA said, yeah, we've been at this a long time. I joined the Human Rights Council in 1985, and conversations continue to be alarmingly similar over the decades. The Human Rights Council was started in 1978 as a result of racial violence at our high school, such that some of our Boston students simply up and left. Dr. Charles Willey, the Harvard sociologist who was a community member, so well respected, was brought in as part of that community response. And he famously said, hey, this town can have a committee to discuss if it's safe to fire a cannon on Patriots Day. Shouldn't we be able to have a conversation about whether it's safe for kids to go to school? And that was really the genesis of the Human Rights Council. I think the DA got it right when she said that people have to trust the system, because systems are simply tools. It's the people who use the tools that matter. Where I'm not sure, and I'm speaking for myself, Rob certainly will have his own ideas, but I'll make the first pitch here. I'm not sure that I agree with her about being careful not to reinvent stuff. And what I mean by that is, I was first of a mind, gosh, we have a very effective ability on the part of our police to receive a phone call and do something. We have a system in the schools to get a report and presumably do something. But what we know about behavior change is you have to make it easy. You have to make it easy for people to change their behavior. And if we want more reporting, then maybe having multiple systems is a way to send a message. You can go here, 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 or here. It's easy. So
I wouldn't want a huge multiplicity of systems, but I don't think we have to try to reduce them to fewer than we already have. Instead, we have to promote what exists now. Because if you enter the system one way, you should get a similar result if you enter it another way for the same problem, I told the school committee, the story, I don't know if it landed or not, that when I arrived at the high school, we had a system. It was called the vice principal. I mean, seriously, that was the system. You went and talked to this guy. And if you believed that something would happen, then somebody else would talk to that guy. But if you believe it went nowhere, then it would extinguish itself. Well, if that's true with people, it's true with web portals and all kinds of stuff. We need evidence it's gonna work, and we're gonna get to that in a minute in our remarks to you. We want to note that we are an independent nonprofit organization, but we work in close harmony with the town and with the police department as defined by them and how they want to work with us. We don't dictate to them, of course. You know that we've got various events. We're a community education kind of organization with the Holocaust Memorial Program, the Climate for Freedom Award, the MLK events that we do, and occasional special programs that you'll hear about. A year ago, we got a grant for the active bystander training. Not because we saw the ADL complaint on our radar, it was just fortuitous timing that we had a resource to offer when things got escalated again around hate and bias and the capacity of this town to manage it. And we have had 4 programs so far, all fully enrolled or over-enrolled. Such was the interest, and we're going to be now building our own in-town capacity to continue these trainings with our own volunteer resources. You mentioned the life cycle of your work, I think was Paul's term, and we didn't quite know how to interpret that, but what I could offer is whatever you think this community needs to hear, I hope we hear it by, let's say, March or April, because then people start to lose attention, seasons change, school ends, and we're somewhat a school cycle community. And then we would recommend that it get reintroduced in a big way in September when people are tuned in again, because any culture change takes sustained effort and takes time. So I don't think you launch things once, but you have a way to stage them and build them.
Can we just define the life cycle?
Yeah, please.
For me, a life cycle, what we're talking about here is it starts anywhere, but it starts with an incident and through reporting, through a response, through education, through corrective action.
Okay.
I mean,
So it's incident specific is your reference.
well, or collective incident.
Right.
It's
Mhm.
something happens or things happen. We know about them. There's some reaction to them. There's some education, and there's some improvement over time. That's the ideal life cycle.
Makes perfect sense. Thank you. One recommendation that we have is that you build on the current reporting systems. 2, that we have people behind those systems that are genuinely committed to them for reasons around human rights and human dignity, in addition to how people might be inclined to protect their own organization, reputation and prerogatives and so on. That's always going to be there, but there's, I think, got to be a human dimension to this and a moral dimension to this if it's going to stick in this town or in any town. The DA mentioned Belmont. Well, Belmont is in fact when I was on the school committee, that was a district that we looked at that had, we thought then, a superior system. So I don't know if that remains so as one of your models, but perhaps. We believe that there should be some kind of impartial and representative group that could collect and interpret townwide data about hate and bias claims or reports. However they got into the system, they need to be aggregated in such a way that they can provide a picture of the town and the life cycle as Paul described. Why would this be necessary? Because if we had a trusted, impartial representative group that could do its work in examining the life cycle, let's call it that. One, it could be done in such a way that we didn't disrespect confidences and didn't reveal identities where that shouldn't happen. Secondly, we could learn a little bit more through these representatives in such a way that we didn't have serious open meeting complications, because we can't have open meeting complications, but that can't be an excuse to know nothing either, or know so little. And you can imagine better than we can who might be on that representative group to look monthly or quarterly at what has come in, what happened, what was the life cycle, are we getting better at this? But certainly it would be police department, school department, town government, maybe somebody out of Marion's office, probably a couple of community members, so that we could say to the community, those are the people who are looking out for us and monitoring over time what's happening. These are people who are a little closer to it than what people might learn in the bridge or at the bleachers at the soccer game, which is not the best places to get information always. One place where so that was recommendation 2. Recommendation 3 is one where we're not asking for work as the Human Rights Council necessarily, but we want to describe to you one function that we have played over the years that has waxed and waned depending on the frequency of events, and perhaps a little bit dependent on whether the police chief reached out to us or not. Although we will say that we've had, I think, commendable relations with every chief since the founding of the Human Rights Council. But here's where we're going with this one. What we have been able to do on request by the police department is meet with people either from town or from elsewhere who believe they experienced an event that they would consider hateful or harmful in some way. And these people did not want to work with the police, did not want to work with government in any form, but wanted to be heard. And if that has been occasionally true over the last 40+ years, it's probably much truer today when people who are undocumented in our communities are terrified of talking to people. And even people who have every legitimate piece of paper they could ever need are afraid of being identified as aligning with people who are, what's the word? Have been marginalized. If, again, it was true in the past, it might be even more so now that people might want to, let's call it a non-governmental channel just to be heard. When it was the Human Rights Council, we never said, well, we're going to be professional mediators or we're going to be problem solvers for you. That wasn't our role. Rather, it was, we're going to listen. We're going to share with you some empathy. We're going to share that pain with you. And that's as far as it's going to go with us. And if you want to go further, here are the resources, because there certainly are resources and laws to protect people. In some way or other, we would hope that that non-governmental avenue for people who believe they have been harmed have an opportunity to express what happened and how they feel about it.
I can jump in with.
Just one more remark, and then
I
I'll
was
yours.
just gonna say a couple.
No, go ahead. No, and well, finally, just and this is my last piece. It's so easy for us to sit here and take a top-down approach. Because this is top-down, it's a committee. And I think one of your challenges is gonna be, okay, now that you've built something or rebuilt something or refined something, let's look at what it would mean to enter that system if I had been the target of harm and was feeling disabled, was feeling unheard, was feeling afraid. Is this something that I would dare use? Because it's very easy for us with power, influence, authority, and confidence in what we're doing to build stuff. But we're building it for people who don't have those assets, at least at that moment in time when they need it most.
And I think that's where, sorry,
That's a big part of what we're doing, you know, like describe the front end. You know, define the value and the needs to get people comfortable and seeing the value of entering the system.
Fine, to turn it over to Rob. Rob, we know, is a longtime educator. He's been a chair more than once, of the Human Rights Council. Has been at it for as long as I have. And we're not gonna claim a lot of success, because here we are, still at it. But we're still at it, and that's a good thing.
support you mentioned doing this top down. I think the focus groups that Debbie's leading, hopefully will inform some of the what are people actually feeling? What are people who might use this? How would they use it? So we still haven't heard from the first debrief, but
Yeah. Well, we'll let Rob talk and then we'll pepper you with questions. And then we'll see if we can get out of here by midnight.
I'll be brief. I was a teacher at the Penn School for 30 years and I was involved with DEI work for most of that time. So I saw these issues come up time and time again. Whether it's the swastika in the bathroom stall, whether it's someone being cavalier with the N-word, whether it is Asian. We had the case where Asian hate against Asian, putting themselves down. These things happen almost every other year. So it's a constant battle. You never, no matter how good your program is, no matter how well you do that year, you start all over from ground zero in the next year. So that's one of the challenges with this work, I think. In terms of the Human Rights Council, I was co-chair for a couple of different terms, during a time of relative peace. And we kept saying we have to be alert because the next thing's coming. Where we had some success, for instance, I had a business owner in town come to us and complain that he was being harassed racially. He was Middle Eastern and he was being harassed by his landlord because they wanted him out of the building. So he was being given slurs and all this. So we just sat down and had coffee, and I think just the process of talking it through really, really helped him. I see him 2 or 3 times a year now, and it's still great that he remembers those times very fondly, just being heard. I can't even remember if we had a specific agenda to going forward from that, but it seemed to resolve. Another time was an incident where a young police officer followed a couple into a convenience store. It was a larger teenage black male and a younger white female from Concord. And the police officer, while the woman was in the aisles, said, "Hey, are you okay? Are you all right?" And she was so offended by this. And unfortunately, this was not the first time this had happened to this young man he was from another town around the 128. And he'd reported it 3 times to his local Human Rights Council and his local police, and 3 different incidents that had happened to him. So our police chief went to his town, went to his door, apologized on behalf of the town and behalf of the police department, while we met with the young woman from Concord and tried to reassure that acted, that intentions might have been good, but the process was not good. And so we were able to, again, off the record, nothing splashy, be able to jump in and do something. We also react to things that are happening in town, maybe with letters or just, well, used to be letters to the journal when I was in charge, but that's some of the other stuff we've done. And again, we had a couple of anti-Semitic incidents that we also dealt with. But again, my time there was pretty peaceful, pretty quiet, but we know we're ready to jump back in, and that's one of the reasons I've been more active with the Human Rights Council these days.
Thank you, guys. You're describing some real world incidents, totally believable and probably not singular incidents. None of that probably gets reported. They're probably handled one-on-one by individual, you know, so I'm thinking back to the life cycle here. How does the town, you know, and having a non-governmental group address individuals, that's great. But then how does this information get back to the larger community? And maybe that's too high a lofty goal, but how does the community become aware of what's going on? And who does that, and how does that improvement happen over
The best
time?
answer we can give you at the present time is that we have one member only, who has a direct two-way with our police chief. So the chief will call her or she will call him, and the rest of us stay out of it. We want to have a clear, accountable channel, and it works.
Yeah, no, but I'm not talking about police in a sense, I'm talking about, so
But that's our
the-
line.
yeah, there are other pieces we're gonna have to think about how to fill in there. And I like your idea of, what do you do with the data? How do you make people feel that something's happening? That's an important piece, you've addressed that. But then, how does the information get back to the town? How are we informed of the atmosphere, the bias atmosphere? Because right now, it's a big mystery. The school's not a mystery, unfortunately, but for me, the town's a bit of a mystery. Is it great? Is it very little happening, or is there underreporting all over it? And you might say, well, it's quiet, who cares? But I think there's a lot going on in town. You described some things, small incidents that we're largely unaware of.
I was gonna say, again, I was that one-on-one,
Yeah.
and I was the chair, and I worked with Tom O'Connor, and he was great. But I also held him to the point that they were underreporting incidents of maybe just car pulls over, there's WB, walking while black.
Yeah.
And to the police officers, just kind of a wellness check to the person walking down the street, it feels like harassment. Those interactions didn't in the past get reported. I do not know if those things are reported these days. Obviously on the traffic stop, you have to record race and sex and all of that stuff in a formal traffic situation, but these social interactions were very important. Having cameras was something that we advocated early on, and that and fortunately the town did take that up, but that's an important tool also, reviewing and measuring police interaction with our citizens. And again, we feel like we have a great police department. It's just all of us have our prejudices, all of us have our biases, we're all have our weaknesses, so it's just good for continuing education.
Other questions?
I know I read the police report in the papers of what is reported, but I know my husband and we like taking walks, and my husband goes crazy at night in neighborhoods that I'm on my knees praying. He comes back without, but he goes crazy because that's his way of doing exercises. And one time he was by Strawberry Hill Road and went down somewhere, and a cop car, I followed him because somebody called. And he likes walking with a big cane. And probably someone said, oh, a black man is walking out there with a, but he did it because sometimes it's cold, icy. And, and they stopped him and said, are you okay? Are you fine? He's like, yeah, I'm fine. And the cop continued. But when I checked the log of that week just to see, because he mentioned it, wasn't one of the things that were logged, yet many times you see similar events like that being reported.
Police blog is interesting. So report of a man chasing a woman. Well, actually, they're both running and she was faster than. Yeah, that's happened before. Other comments or questions?
I can get one.
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. It's still. When Rob, when you, correct me if I'm wrong, when you were talking, you're saying that you were there during quiet and peaceful time, but there was still stuff. And I guess I take from that the Human Rights Council and perhaps to like the DEI Commission, places to go outside of the police department, where when people feel the need to unburden themselves or have concerns and have a mechanism for them to, as Deidre said, feel heard and feel seen, and nothing judicial or law enforcement wise happens other than people feeling heard and feeling seen, correct?
If that's what they ask.
If that's what they ask.
Yes, it's their call. And in fact, that's really something that was central to the active bystander training, which you were part of as well. That we want to make sure that people who consider themselves targets get re-empowered by making the choices about what they want to do, knowing A, there are alternative avenues forward, and B, they don't have to do it alone if they don't want to.
Personally, knowing that you're actually not of them, is huge. And I wonder if they can, in looking at the outcomes of this body, that not only reporting, but making certain that something like that leaves people empowered, leaves people knowing that they're not alone, that something like that is also sort of part of your outcome when you go back to the select board to suggest it to them.
To get very specific about this empowering idea, one example, how easy is it for people to grab phones these days and videotape a altercation, an exchange? What we're advising people is, you know who gets that video? The target gets that video. We don't go running to your office with it. It's not our call. But we want to let them know that we'll go with them if they want, or they can throw it away if they want, but it's theirs.
And again, I see you not alone.
Yeah.
But you mentioned bystander training, which I think is really, really valuable. In general, the other value I see, maybe it's theoretical, is that bystanders can report as well. I mean, the victim may or may not want to report, but the bystander can report it on behalf of the victim anonymously, and that's really valuable. And I just wonder how much more is there out there of bystanders observing things that the victim doesn't feel comfortable reporting. So I know that's not part of the bystander training, but as we evolve this reporting system, I think it's a benefit of having bystanders observe, because they can add to our information base as well.
And they are encouraged to not do it on behalf of somebody else, do it on behalf of yourself. This is
Exactly.
what I saw and it disturbs me.
Right,
I'm not deciding to be an agent for somebody else.
Well, it's both, yeah.
They can only speak for themselves.
Yeah, exactly. I would say this without you in the room, Lieutenant,
I'd like you to walk out.
no, with some of the work that we do, we encounter people who recognize that Concord is kind of remarkable in that in all of our human rights activities and our civil rights activities, the police have been our ally. And we meet people who say, well, you don't have to go too many towns over before we train people on how to protect themselves from those in uniforms. And that simply doesn't happen here. We've got brilliant community policing. And as a result, people like us are quick to engage with police, knowing it's not gonna unravel and go sideways on us. That's the result of a lot of good work by a lot of good people over your way, so thank you.
Thank you.
I'll just say one more thing, and that is, I'm a proud Concordian. I always wanted to see my town in the best light. But I also realize, you know, as the DA was saying, these events have come to light. They've always been there. Between individuals, between kids, whatever, they haven't been resolved. And my instinct to say, well, it's just one off, or it's Concord's great. We have a few problems and. No, I think we gotta take the scab off the wound here. I think that's what I'm hoping that's what this organization, your group is doing. Take the scab off, let's scrub it out. It's gonna be painful. We're gonna have a lot more complaints because people will know that they're gonna be heard. And I think that's why she has so many complaints, is because other people have complained and yes, there's some actions going on.
I think we want to make it safe and easy and to shine a light on these incidents, and shine a light for the whole community. I'm mindful of the time. I want to thank you guys for coming. You're definitely part of the larger solution here. Not a little piece, but this is very, very helpful. Thank you for coming.
Thanks
Thanks so much.
With your permission, can we go 10 minutes over the 7:30? Maybe 5 minutes, we'll see. We had two things on the agenda. One, on the focus groups, there's an effort, we have the next one coming up on February 5th. We're making an effort to publicize it a little bit broadly. Do you want to, very briefly, I sat there as an observer. Of course, I couldn't keep my mouth shut, so I became a participant. But I thought it was very, very valuable. I was just writing down suggestions from those folks. Do you want to comment?
Yeah. So, as I mentioned, we had the first focus group, Tuesday. And so in addition to Paul, we had 3 other people, we really spent about, in the end, I guess it ended up being about an hour and a half-ish, total. And we really went in depth on a number of questions. And we started out with what the experiences were that people had, or if they knew of people had a hate or bias incident, whether it's in town or whether it's somewhere else. And then talked about barriers to reporting, to hear what people thought. And then, talked about if, what they would want to see in a system, should we have a system, those kinds of things. And then what would that look like? And then what do they want us to do with the information? And, I will be collecting this. We're going to have a second focus group, which I'll talk about in a second, and then when I get all the information, then I'll kind of put it together in a more formal report to all of you and to the public. But I think one of the things, and a lot of this was overlap but they really wanted to make sure that there was a confidential way to report. But there's also fear of retaliation. And they brought up something, the experiences that were shared. So one person knew a business owner in town who experienced a pretty bad incident. But that person was afraid of, you know, retaliation if that was reported. And I think, you know, that's a really, and also like, what would that do to their business? And we haven't really talked about that, but I thought that was a really important thing to think about. They also said that it would be really important to know what would we be doing with the information if they came and reported things. That's something that they feel like we really need to tell them up front, because that would help people decide, are we gonna report or not report? So I thought that was really a valuable thing. I mean, all of it was valuable, but these were just some highlights. Also, they really thought it was important to have multiple ways to report.
Yeah.
They said, are you gonna have somebody there to talk to? Or what are we, you know, just gonna go off into some, you know, portal? So I think we need to think about that too, when we think about developing the system. How does the reporting happen? Do we have somebody? Is this gonna, and I realize that implicates kind of staff resources for the town, because if we're having somebody doing the intakes, or, you know, and how is this, you know, how will it be handled? So all of these things are important. They also thought that it would be important when we talked about, like, you know, okay, what do you do with the information? They're really interested, very interested in the themes, you know, so when people are reporting incidents, what is happening? They seemed less interested in the numbers so much as really more the themes. Like, when I say themes, I mean, like, what types of incidents happened? Were they swastikas painted all over the place? Were they some sort of, you know, verbal altercation with somebody? What are people complaining about? What is, you know, how often? Those things are important, but really, what are the themes? And then they want a way that these things can be discussed publicly and know the town knows what's going on, and then a way to talk about these things, and then figure out a way to address them to help reduce them sort of on this kind of higher level. And, you know, at the same time, maintaining the confidentiality if somebody wants to do that. So that's just at a really high level. And Paul, feel free to.
Yeah, no, they really had a lot to say, and it was very helpful. I was taking notes, yeah. Going back to the life cycle, it's just to find, so the last piece of the life cycles, what do we do? That's in the community piece.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of value. Let's do another one and see.
Yeah, so the next one is, just so everyone knows, since we have everybody here, it is scheduled for Thursday, February 5th. And it's going to be from 5:30 to 7:30 at the public library, which is the one located in downtown Concord, I guess.
In the Goodwood.
Yeah, the Goodwood, yeah, I couldn't
Yeah.
remember.
The
the
main, the
name.
main one.
The fancy
Yeah.
room.
Yeah.
So it's a big room. We need to
Yeah.
fill it up.
Yeah,
So
so,
it's 5:30 to 7:30.
Yeah,
on Thursday.
yeah.
And I want to thank you for doing it. You really ran it well. You were structured, you had good questions. You pivoted when the conversation went, it was really well done. Sorry I had to leave a little early. So
Right.
I think it's really value as we collect the information.
Is there a number of target number in mind of folks you'd like to listen to?
I mean, I would like to hear as many people who want to come and talk to me, and so if, you know, I mean, what we tried to do, I can't remember if we said, I think we said 20 was the limit, right? Just to keep so that everybody can participate, but
During the session.
yeah, in a session. However, I am happy to schedule more of them.
Great.
I'm not able, I'm going on vacation next week, and I have some work things, so.
We're not gonna do
you
it
know,
during vacation.
On the airplane.
Exactly.
But, you know, in February, if after the 5th, people want to have more, I'm happy to do more, you know, and set that up. And if, you know, we're gonna send it to the bridge, do that tomorrow night. And then, but if you don't mind, like, letting
Oh,
the school
mention-
folks know, and that the committee, that would be great. And anybody else?
Like-
How much?
Did you have an in that you wanted in your sample? This is just sort of intellectual curiosity. Did you want to have an in of, I want to have this many people to put together my sample?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
I mean, this, I must confess, is not a very scientific process.
Sure.
What I was, I mean, I think the more the better. So, you know, I mean, the three people who attended were amazing and really valuable and contributed their time. But we do need more people because the more people that we have, the more input we will get, and I think the better product we will have. So I don't really know that. I'm sorry, because I'm not like mathematically inclined, but I don't have the end, but or whatever it's called.
Quite honestly, I'd like a more diverse mix
Yeah.
of people. The group there was great, but they weren't very diverse. And I won't say anymore. It was great. But we
Have
need,
we checked the public housing, advertising near the public housing? Well,
how are we doing it?
have we looked at advertising near the public housing and stuff?
No.
Or how do they get the news? Do they have a newsletter, bulletin, or?
Yeah.
We could certainly help you see that it gets pushed out through the Human Rights Council
Okay.
mailing list, the DEI group at the league, I think would be an important resource. I think CORE would be an important resource.
The school.
I think we should have the leader post a form for us.
Yeah. There are a number of portals. We have an opinion piece on the bridge going out and it's on the website. You know, we gotta flood the zone
Yeah.
because in this town, you gotta flood the zone.
All that you want.
Yeah, so sad to say that, well, I've been in conference, the least amount of time of all of you. Because we.
I announced at select board meetings for all the 12 people that listened to that. So,
I
so,
think this is
but-
well.
okay, well, thank you. If we're running a little overtime, thank you again, to be continued. The last item of business is our next meeting. But let me just say in general, so I think we're winding down, doesn't have to end the research stage and briefing and input. I think we could continue that, but now we have to kind of take the information. Okay, how are we going, start answering the questions that we posed in the work plan, and we dealt a lot of them, the input, the output, the uses, the structure. So I think we should start doing that in our next meeting, or review how we're going to do that. First week in February, look, I know the 5th was out because we're doing the,
Right, that's the.
let me do one meeting at a time because I'm not brave. Oh, the week of February 2nd, what doesn't work for me? So the 5th is out. How about the Wednesday, the 4th?
The school committee meeting, so.
Okay,
Yeah, and the second doesn't work because I have another presentation.
Is that the third?
3rd or the 6th?
Third works.
The third.
February 3rd?
Yeah.
Going once? Twice? So, okay, February 3rd, 6 p.m. And then at that meeting, we'll discuss the next ones. Everybody's coming busy. We have school vacation coming up. It's a bad week. I'd like to have 2 meetings in February,
I'm
So-
sorry. Give me some
Yeah.
again. So you said 6 p.m., right? On.
6 p.m. And do you like, this is better than the basement of 55 Church? We'll talk about that. Okay, thank you all for coming. You enriched the discussion
Thank you.
terrifically, and I don't see any other comments, so we'll adjourn the meeting.